Hey there, New Life. Pastor Ross here. I want to talk to you about grace. Grace is one of those terms that we use in the church quite a bit, but my experience has shown that few Christians really understand grace. And maybe that's because grace is one of those things that defies definition. You see, in Titus 2 and verse 11, Paul writes that the grace of God appeared bringing salvation to all men. Well, who brought that salvation? It was Jesus Christ himself. You see, Jesus Christ is grace personified. Grace is the expression of Jesus in his life. And so that's why it defies a definition. There's no words, there's nothing in this world that could summarize grace. Instead, what we need to do is we need to understand the significance and the power that grace plays in our lives, what it begins to produce and do for us. And the first thing I want you to see is what grace offers is it offers to you and me total forgiveness. It doesn't matter what you've done, who you did it with, how many times you did it, and even if you're going to do it again. Grace says that because of what Jesus did on the cross, you're forgiven. You've been separated and set free from that sin because it was paid for by Jesus' work, by his sacrifice. And not because you deserved it, not because you cleaned up your act, but because Jesus loves you. And because of that, what grace also does is it destroys shame. Shame says that there's something fundamentally wrong with you and me, that we're beyond repair and there's no hope for us. But grace, being Jesus himself, is bigger, and it says, but I've redeemed you. I've offered you a new life and a new way forward. I've overcome that shame. I've set you free from that shame. And so what it does as well is grace produces and provides security. Because God's grace isn't reactive to you and me. God's grace is a decision that God made on our behalf. It's the heart of God saying, I love you no matter what. Then our love, the acceptance, the approval, the value, and the worth that comes from God doesn't go up and down. It doesn't change based on how we're doing today. It's as rock solid as ever. And so it also bestows value and worth, significance to you and me, because the grace of God says you and I are as equally valuable to God as Jesus himself is. Great value has been bestowed on you. And therefore, grace sets us free from the question that haunts all of us. Am I too much? And am I enough? Am I worthy of being loved? And God's grace says, you are, and I have, and I do. And so we never have to ask ourselves that question anymore. Instead, we know the answer. I'm enough and not too much for Jesus. And because of that, grace offers you and me a seat at the table with him. That we get to be with him and dine with him and go through life together with him without any fear, without any worry that he's going to turn his back on us, because he's already committed himself to us. He's already made himself one with us because of grace. And then lastly, what grace does is it offers us the power now to live. Because grace has made it possible for Jesus to reside in you and me, it's also empowered us with his life to face the challenges we face. You see, the reality is we can't have too much of grace. We don't need to balance grace with anything else, because to do so would be basically saying that you can have too much of Jesus. And that's not the case. What we need to understand is because grace is the expression of Jesus' life, then really what we need to see is that grace is the fuel in which the new covenant runs on. And we need to accept and embrace and trust this grace that's been given to you. So, may you go with the grace of God, and remember you're loved.